I've spent 99 years watching people ruin their lives with math that doesn't add up. And the most common tragedy happens right at the finish line when the hair is gray and the judgment should be sharpest. You believe that entering your golden years debt-free is the ultimate badge of financial safety. So you're planning to empty your accounts to kill that mortgage, thinking you're finally buying peace of mind. The mathematical reality is that liquidity is your oxygen in old age. Killing your cash flow to own a pile of bricks is just a sophisticated way to suffocate your portfolio while the bank laughs at your version of freedom. If you enjoy being a financial slave to an illiquid asset, keep doing exactly what you're doing. But if you want to survive the next 30 years without ending up in the demographic cemetery of the house rich and cash poor, you'd better stop and look at what you're actually doing with your capital. Think with me about the nature of a house. To the primal part of your brain, it's a cave, a fortress, a place where the wolves can't get you. And that biological hardwiring is precisely why you're about to make a massive mistake. Your brain is sabotaging you by confusing ownership with security because your ancestors survived by holding on to physical things they could touch. But in a modern financial system, that instinct is a suicide pact. You're letting the primal fear of debt override the logic of capital allocation, choosing the emotional high of a zero balance over the compounding power of a liquid reserve that could actually save your life when the storm hits. I won't make you a billionaire by next Tuesday, but I will stop you from becoming one of those pathetic cases where a person has a beautiful, paid-off roof over their head, but can't afford the grocery bill or the medical specialist because their wealth is trapped in the sheetrock and the driveway. Look back at the history of human stupidity if you want to see where this leads. In 1929, the people who were wiped out weren't just the ones playing the margins on Wall Street. It was the people who had every cent of their net worth tied up in land and property that suddenly had no buyers. When the liquidity evaporated, the ownership of the dirt didn't matter because you can't eat dirt, and you can't use a fence post to pay a tax bill. I've watched this cycle repeat over and over again, through the Nifty 50, through the high inflation insanity of the 70s, and through the 2008 bloodbath, where people realized far too late that a house is a liability that masquerades as an asset until the day you try to sell it in a panic. You have to understand that the bank is not your friend, but they are a very useful tool if you know how to use their money to fund your survival, while keeping your own money working in the trenches of the productive economy. Consider the biological root of your panic. Your amygdala is screaming at you that owing money is a threat to your existence, but that part of your brain hasn't evolved since we were dodging saber-toothed tigers on the savannah. It doesn't understand the concept of an arbitrage spread. It doesn't understand that if you have a mortgage at 3 or 4% and the world is handing you 7 or 8% in high-quality businesses, the bank is actually subsidizing your lifestyle. To pay off that loan early is to voluntarily hand back a gift that the financial system has given you. It is an act of mathematical self-mutilation, performed in the name of feeling good for 5 minutes at a backyard barbecue, while your neighbor admires your lack of a monthly payment. Envy is the only sin that provides no pleasure, and watching your neighbor burn his mortgage papers while you keep yours is a test of temperament that most people fail because they care more about social signaling than they do about the actual compounding of their wealth. Let's walk through the math year by year for 30 years because most people are too lazy or too scared to actually look at the numbers in the sunlight. Imagine you have $300,000 sitting in a brokerage account and a $300,000 mortgage at 4%. If you take that money today and kill the mortgage, your net worth is exactly the same on day one, but your liquidity is zero. You have traded $300,000 of oxygen for a pile of lumber. In year one, you saved yourself $12,000 in interest, but you lost the opportunity to earn $24,000 in a decent basket of productive American businesses. By year 5, that gap isn't just a few $1,000s, it's a widening canyon. The compounding effect of the money you kept is a sensitive plant that you've just ripped out by the roots to check its progress. By year 10, the person who kept the debt and held the assets has a capital base that is starting to breathe on its own, generating dividends that cover half the mortgage payment anyway, while you are sitting in your paid-off house with nothing but a tax bill and a maintenance list. By year 20, the divergence is staggering. The person with the liquidity has a fortress of capital that can withstand a medical catastrophe, a market crash, or a family emergency, while you are still house-rich and dependent on whatever crumbs the government or a pension might throw your way. By year 30, the mortgage is gone for both of you. But the person who stayed the course has a mountain of liquid wealth that has grown through 3 decades of human ingenuity and inflation, while you just have an old house that needs a new roof. You have to realize that debt is the only thing the government is working hard to make cheaper every single day. When you have a fixed-rate mortgage, you are effectively shorting the dollar. You are paying back the bank with future dollars that are worth significantly less than the ones you borrowed, while your assets are priced in those same devalued dollars, making them nominally more expensive. It is the only way for a regular person to benefit from the systemic debasement of the currency, and you're trying to opt out of it because you want to feel safe. The psychological diagnosis here is a mix of loss aversion and an arrogance that you can somehow beat the system by being conservative. But what you call conservative is actually a reckless gamble on your own longevity and the stability of the local real estate market. If the neighborhood goes to hell, your equity goes to hell with it. If you have that same money in a global basket of businesses, you aren't tied to the fate of a single zip code. Think about the cinematic hypothetical of the man in 2008 who thought he was a genius for having 70% equity in his home. When the market collapsed and he lost his job, he couldn't get a dime out of that house because the bank stopped lending. He sat in his safe house with a red screen on his computer, cold sweat on his brow, and family tension that you could cut with a knife, all because he couldn't access the wealth he thought he owned. He was a prisoner of his own equity. If he had kept that money in a liquid reserve, he could have coasted through the crisis, bought more assets when they were on sale, and slept like a baby. You must apply the rule of inversion to your retirement planning. If you want to ensure a miserable old age, the recipe is simple. Tie up all your capital in illiquid assets, ignore the spread between borrowing costs and investment returns, and let your emotions dictate your financial strategy. If you want to avoid that ruin, you do the opposite. You maintain a liquidity fortress. You stay boring. You keep the debt as long as the math favors you, and you treat compounding as a sacred process that must not be interrupted by your need for a psychological pat on the back. Survival in this game isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being less stupid than everyone else for a longer period of time. Most people are going to be very stupid about their homes over the next 20 years because they can't separate the utility of a roof from the logic of a balance sheet. Think about the cemetery of forgotten financial ideas. It is filled with people who thought they were being safe by avoiding all forms of leverage while inflation ate their purchasing power like a slow-moving cancer. Compounding is the eighth wonder of the world, but it requires the one thing most humans lack: the ability to do nothing, to leave the money alone, to let the clock do the heavy lifting. When you pay off a mortgage early, you are actively doing something. And in the world of high-level investing, doing something is usually a mistake. You are digging up the seeds every morning to see if they've sprouted, and then you wonder why you don't have a forest 30 years later. The forest only grows if you have the temperament to leave the soil undisturbed. The abyss of financial ruin is rarely a sudden drop. It's a long, slow grind of making suboptimal choices based on how you feel on a Tuesday morning. You feel a little heavy because you owe the bank money, so you decide to lighten the load by destroying your most productive capital. It's madness. It's like a captain of a ship throwing his fuel overboard because he doesn't like the weight of the barrels, even though he's still 1,000 miles from port. You need that fuel. You need that liquidity. The world is a dangerous, unpredictable place, and the only thing that gives you true options is cash or assets that can be turned into cash in a heartbeat. You can't eat a kitchen cabinet, and you can't pay a world-class surgeon with a piece of your driveway. Stop and look at the reality of the situation. We are living through a period where the cost of borrowing for a home is often lower than the long-term rate of inflation, plus the real growth of the economy. This is a historical anomaly that you are trying to throw away because you read some mindset fluff about being debt-free. Forget the fluff. Focus on the math of the trenches. If you have a 3% loan and inflation is 4%, the bank is paying you 1% a year to live in that house. Why, in the name of all that is holy, would you want to stop them from paying you? It is an irrational act driven by a lack of historical perspective and a failure to understand the basic plumbing of the monetary system. If you want to be house rich and cash poor, go ahead and send that big check to the mortgage company. Join the millions of people who have a beautiful lawn and a hollowed-out retirement account. But if you want to have the freedom that only comes from a massive, liquid, compounding pile of capital, you will learn to live with the debt. You will treat it as a strategic tool. You will keep your eyes on the spread and your hands off the principal. Wealth isn't about what you own. It's about the options you have available to you when things go wrong. A mortgage is just a contract. Liquidity is the ultimate insurance policy. Be boring. Keep the debt. Hold the assets. Let the clock work its magic while you enjoy the scenery, knowing that you have the oxygen you need to survive whatever the world throws at you. Every decade has its own version of the Dutch tulip mania or the South Sea bubble, and right now, the mania is the obsession with equity at the expense of utility. People treat their home equity like a scorecard for their life, but it's a scorecard that no one else can see, and that doesn't buy you anything at the store. I've seen men who were worth $5 million on paper in real estate who couldn't come up with $50,000 in cash to save their own businesses when the credit markets froze. They went bankrupt while owning a fortune in bricks. Don't be that person. Don't let your ego lead you into a trap where you are wealthy in theory, but a beggar in practice. The grinding reality of life is that the bills must be paid in currency, not in ownership percentage. You have to be a guardian of your own compounding. It is a sensitive plant that thrives on neglect. The more you meddle with it, the more you try to optimize it by moving money into safe, non-productive uses like home equity, the more you kill its potential. If you leave $1 alone in a good business, it will bring friends back with it. If you put that dollar into your house, it just sits there, gathering dust and depreciating as the roof gets older and the plumbing starts to leak. One of those dollars is an employee that works for you 24 hours a day. The other is a brick that you have to pay to maintain. Choose wisely which one you want more of in your life. The world doesn't care about your feelings of security. The market doesn't care that you feel better without a mortgage. The only thing the market respects is the cold, hard logic of capital flow. If you interrupt that flow to satisfy a primitive urge for shelter, you are going to pay a price that is much higher than the interest rate on your loan. You are going to pay the price of what could have been. You are going to look back in 30 years and realize that your safety cost you millions of dollars in lost growth. That is a heavy price to pay for a feeling. I'd rather have the money and the debt than have the house and the regret. Think about the long-term survival of your family. If you die with a paid-off house and a small bank account, your heirs have to sell the house to get the money, which takes months and involves commissions and taxes. If you die with a mortgage and a massive brokerage account, they have the cash immediately to handle your affairs, pay the taxes, and decide what to do with the property at their leisure. Liquidity is the ultimate gift to your future self and your survivors. It is the ability to act rather than being acted upon by circumstances. Most people are acting like absolute idiots because they are following a script written for a world that no longer exists. They are following the advice of their grandfathers who lived in a world with no inflation and no global capital markets. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world of constant currency debasement and incredible technological productivity. In this world, the person who holds the productive assets and the low-cost debt is the one who wins the game of survival. The person who clings to the security of a paid-off house is the one who gets left behind, wondering why they worked so hard for so long only to end up with so little freedom. It takes a strong temperament to ignore the crowd. It takes a certain kind of person to look at a mortgage balance and not feel a sense of dread, but rather a sense of opportunity. But that is the temperament required for real wealth. It is the ability to see the world as it is, not as you wish it were, or as your primitive brain tells you it is. If you can master that temperament, if you can look at the math and trust it over your emotions, you will find yourself in a very small percentage of people who actually achieve true financial independence. Remember, it's not the debt that kills you. It's the lack of cash to service it when the world goes to hell. As long as you have the liquid reserves to cover your obligations for years at a time, the debt is not a threat. It is an engine. It is a way to amplify your reach and protect your future. Don't let the debt-free chorus lead you off a cliff. They mean well, but they are statistically illiterate and historically blind. They are trying to solve a psychological problem with a financial solution, and that always leads to a bad outcome. Solve your psychological problems with philosophy, and solve your financial problems with math. If you can't sleep at night because you owe money on your house, then by all means pay it off. But realize that you are paying for your sleep with your future wealth. It is a very expensive sedative. Most people would be better off learning to sleep with the debt and keeping the money. They would be better off training their minds to understand that the debt is a hedge against the very things they are afraid of. It is a hedge against inflation. It is a hedge against the loss of purchasing power. It is a tool for the wise and a trap for the foolish. Be the wise one. I've seen it all in my 99 years. I've seen the booms and the busts, the geniuses who went broke, and the slow and steady types who became incredibly wealthy by simply not doing anything stupid. Paying off a low-interest mortgage when you have the capital to invest is, in my view, one of those stupid things that look smart to the uninformed. It's an error of arrogance, thinking you know better than the math of compounding. It's an error of envy, wanting what the neighbor has. And it's an error of impatience, wanting to feel finished before the game is actually over. The game isn't over until you draw your last breath, and until that day, you need liquidity. You need the ability to pivot. You need the comfort of knowing that your money is out there in the world, working in the trenches, growing, multiplying, and providing you with the means to live life on your own terms. A paid-off house is a static thing. A compounding portfolio is a dynamic thing. One is a dead monument to your past work. The other is a living engine for your future. Don't trade the engine for the monument until you're actually ready to be buried under it. Think with me one last time about the spread. If you can borrow at 4 and earn at 8, you are making 4% on the bank's money every single year. Over 30 years, that spread alone, on a $300,000 mortgage, creates a massive amount of wealth that didn't exist before. It is wealth created out of thin air by the magic of arbitrage and time. If you pay off the loan, you are voluntarily walking away from that wealth. You are saying no thank you to millions of dollars because you want a piece of paper that says you own the dirt. It is the most expensive piece of paper you will ever buy. Stay boring. Keep the debt. Hold the assets. Don't let the primal urges of a caveman dictate the financial strategy of a modern human. Look at the math, trust the process, and let the sensitive plant of compounding grow until it covers everything you need. That is the only way to truly win. Everything else is just a sophisticated way to lose slowly while feeling good about it. I've spent a century watching the results of both paths, and the path of liquidity and compounding is the only one that leads to true safety in an uncertain world.